Today's video is sponsored by Current. In 2010, Darren Sharper wrote, "My daughter makes me mindful of how women are treated, undervalued, and exploited, which is why I feel compelled to take advantage of this opportunity to speak up about domestic violence." So some of y'all may be familiar with the term Freudian slip, which is named after Austrian neurologist Sigmund Freud. So basically, it's when a person accidentally states their true thoughts and feelings despite an attempt to hide them. There may have actually been a little bit of that in this statement, and if you read it again with that in mind, it almost sounds like Darren Sharper was giving us a bit of a preview of the extremely dark turn that his life was about to take. This makes me real mindful of how women are treated, undervalued, and exploited, which is why I just feel compelled to take full advantage of this opportunity. Creepy, I know, but we gotta keep going. So this is a picture from August 1997. Darren Sharper attends his first NFL training camp. This is a picture from August 2016, precisely 19 years later. And in this picture, Darren Sharper is sentenced to basically 19 years in prison. So the average NFL career is about 3.5 years. And Darren Sharper's 14 seasons overshoots that by a ton. Now the average prison sentence in the US is 2.5 years. And unfortunately, he's managed to overshoot that one by an even wider margin. On August 18, 2016, Darren Sharper was sentenced to 220 months. That's 18 years and 4 months of incarceration, followed by 3 years of supervised release and a $20,000 fine. Although it is important to note that he could get parole in about 8 years. Now the story of Darren Sharper is a disturbing one. A guy who was highly respected by other seemingly respectable people actually turns out to be a wolf in sheep's clothing. Or more harshly and honestly more accurately, he turns out to be a serial rapist, which is simply defined as someone who commits that atrocious crime multiple times. In my opinion, it's one of the most deplorable acts a person can commit. And I gotta admit that as empathetic as I try to be, rape and sexual assault, this is one that's always tough for me to try to cover. For me personally, it always just kind of feels unforgivable, especially when the perpetrator is in their damn 30s, fully grown adult who knows exactly what they're doing. But if you ask the people who knew Darren Sharper growing up, not a single one of them could have ever seen this coming. This is a quote from a USA Today article. It comes from the wife of Darren's high school football coach. "I'm telling you, there's no way you could have seen it coming because there's not a better family that I have ever been involved with in my 30 plus years of education as far as support and holding of accountability. These boys didn't go off and do their own thing. Were they perfect? They were teenage kids. But when the allegations first broke, I was just completely shocked. At first you want to say, it simply can't be true." Now, I don't blame anybody for not just knowing this, but there is research that strongly suggests that, this is the wrong way to think about who's capable of doing this stuff, man. In 1987, the FBI conducted research on serial rapists, subtitled "His Characteristics and Victims." Here's a quick excerpt from their findings. Many characteristics of rapists appear relatively normal. Rather than being isolated, unsuccessful individuals, the serial rapist more often than not comes from an average or advantaged home, and as an adult is a well-groomed, intelligent, employed individual who is living with others in a family context. Now you actually see a similar reaction over and over and over when you read through quotes from people who felt they knew Darren well, and they're all in some way or another repeating essentially the exact same question. How does a guy go from one extreme to another? And while my goal in this video is not to prove this next thought, and I'm honestly not even saying that this is what I think happened, but I do think it's important to consider the possibility that one of these extremes, the public persona, only ever existed to mask that other extreme, which could have been lurking there behind the curtains this entire time. So today we're going to take a look at the very true and very disturbing story of 5-time Pro Bowler, Super Bowl champ, and now convicted criminal, Darren Sharper. So without further ado, you already know what time it is, fellas. Cue the way. Alright, before we jump in, quick word from today's video sponsor, Current. This is not a prepaid card. Nah, this is a way to manage your money on mobile. And when it's easier to access, you're much more likely to stay on top of it. Sometimes money gets tight. Maybe you get a little bit excited and overspend. Or maybe you got bills due a day or two before you actually get paid. Current offers solutions to both of these problems. First off, you can get your paycheck up to 2 days early. An extremely clutch feature that'll keep you far away from the payday loan. And just in case you go over a little bit, you got $100 in overdraft protection. Now they call this the future of banking because they've modernized the process. You can easily send and receive money, no problem, and you can deposit your paycheck with the camera on your phone. So if you need a better way to manage all these holiday funds, whether they're coming in or going out, click the link in the description and grab you a Current card today. Man, shout out to Current once again for sponsoring the video. Without further ado, let's go. By all accounts, Darren Sharper comes from a good family, as you were probably able to pick up from the quote used in the intro. USA Today also spoke to Darren's basketball coach, who went out of his way to show respect to the Sharper family and kind of distance them from Darren's behavior. They need to recognize he came from a tremendous background and had one of the best support systems in place with his father and mother. So in high school, Darren Sharper was a two-sport star. He was an honor roll kid who was on the student council, in the foreign language club, and had perfect attendance for 3 of his 4 high school years. You can definitely see his parents' influence there. But unfortunately, at the end of the day, that stuff doesn't mean anything, or, actually that's not true. It's not that it doesn't mean anything, it just doesn't mean everything. Accolades on a resume are a lot like box score stats in a football game. In the majority of cases, they give you at least a somewhat accurate description of how good a guy played, but it obviously doesn't tell the full story. Now, Darren was one of the most popular kids in high school. He was said to have been a natural leader who always had a smile on his face. He was somebody the other kids looked up to. On the football field, Darren and his older brother Jamie controlled both sides of the ball, with Darren playing quarterback and Jamie playing linebacker. Like their dad before them, both of the Sharper boys would make it to the NFL, and being only 1 year apart in age, they would not only get drafted in the same year, but in the same round. Only 26 picks apart, which is pretty damn incredible. Now, before he'd go on to play 14 seasons in the league, Darren attended college at William & Mary. Not exactly known as a football powerhouse or a hotbed for future NFL stars. Still, Darren attended the school partly because he wanted to remain at the quarterback position, which he'd excelled at in high school. Funny story, and I promise the stories coming up later in this video are not, so enjoy this one. So Darren chose that school, which was more known for academics, probably with a little bit of a push from his parents, but also because he wanted to stay at the quarterback position. He could have attended a larger school and had a straighter path to the NFL, but he was dead set on playing quarterback. So when he got there, you can imagine he felt pretty horrible when the coaches decided that they was going to force him to change his position anyway. So he's forced to go from quarterback to safety. Darren is not happy about it. But 4 years later, his 24 career interceptions set a new record for picks at the school. He also set the record for not only interception return yards, but punt return yards. Dude was an athlete. Following his senior season, where he intercepted 10 passes and was named Conference Player of the Year, Darren Sharper was selected by the Green Bay Packers, 60th overall in the 1997 NFL Draft. His brother Jamie, as I mentioned earlier, was drafted in that same round, 34th overall, to play linebacker for the Baltimore Ravens. Through 14 seasons in the league, Darren Sharper was one of the best safeties in the game. In his first season, he broke the Packers franchise record for most defensive touchdowns by a rookie, a record that had stood for 64 years and it also tied the overall franchise record. He also got his first taste of the Super Bowl that year, although Darren's Packers would fall to the Broncos. By year 3 of his illustrious but admittedly stained career, Darren recorded over 100 tackles for the first time, got his first sack, and continued to take the ball away from opposing offenses. This put the league on notice. In the following year, dude landed the knockout punch that he'd been setting up during those first few seasons. The year 2000 was Darren's true coming out party in the league. Dude led the NFL in interceptions with 9 picks. That, along with 92 tackles and a sack, was enough to get him named to his first All-Pro team, which became almost a yearly tradition throughout this dude's career. From the year 2000 to 2010, he was named to 6 All-Pro teams, 5 Pro Bowls, and he led the league in interceptions, not just once, but twice. And he did it in seasons that was separated by damn near a full decade. In 2009, he was a huge part of that New Orleans Saints Super Bowl team. I was actually going to school in Baton Rouge, Louisiana at the time, so I was basically forced to watch the Saints every week because they was always on TV. And I specifically remember marveling, one, at Drew Brees' footwork. I was always impressed by that. And two, that this old, slow-ass safety was always in the right place at the right time, making pick after pick after pick. It baffled me. Point is, Darren Sharper was a great football player for a long time in the NFL, bro. But he had a dark secret that would little by little come to light. In 2010, Darren Sharper wrote, "My daughter makes me mindful of how women are treated, undervalued, and exploited, which is why I feel compelled to take advantage of this opportunity to speak up about domestic violence." But unfortunately, it seems like that mindfulness didn't travel beyond his own flesh and blood. So some of y'all may be familiar with the term Freudian slip, which is named after Austrian neurologist Sigmund Freud. So a Freudian slip is defined as an error in speech that occurs due to the interference of an unconscious wish or thought. So basically, it's when a person accidentally states their true thoughts and feelings despite an attempt to hide them. There may have actually been a little bit of that in this statement, and if you read it again with that in mind, it almost sounds like Darren Sharper was giving us a bit of a preview of the extremely dark turn that his life was about to take. Check it out. This makes me real mindful of how women are treated, undervalued, and exploited, which is why I feel compelled to take advantage of this opportunity. Creepy, I know, but we gotta keep going. 1 year later, 2 women filed a criminal complaint against dude, saying that they were possibly sexually assaulted after passing out at Darren's condo. They became concerned when they woke up to find that their underwear had been removed. One of the women spoke about being in and out of consciousness, and every time she woke up, there was either someone sexually assaulting her or about to. I actually remember reading this story back in the day, and I found it very weird. Like, why does she keep going back to sleep? As Darren's story continues, and you realize that a part of his MO was actually drugging the women, all of a sudden it all makes perfect sense, and there's really no telling how long dude was actually using these weak ass tactics. Now, according to the story, the 2 women were supposedly taken to the hospital where they underwent examination. But unfortunately for them, nothing ever came of it. And according to some articles, there's records that indicate evidence that the detective or detectives in charge never actually sent the rape kit off to be examined. According to the police report, one officer wrote, he said the nurse told him she didn't find any evidence of sexual assault. But in a later interview with CBS, that same nurse said she would never say something like that because that wasn't her role at the hospital. Make of that part what you will, but there's more. So only 5 days after the accusation was made, which was 1 day after it occurred, by the way, the Miami Police Department that was over this thing completely closed the case. All right, open and close case. You got nothing. It's over with. Now, while there's no evidence that Darren fully went through with it in that particular scenario, it seems that this may have been when things really started to turn dark. I mean, who knows how long a person lives with these dark desires before they snap and decide to actually act on them? But this was only 1 year following Darren's retirement, giving credence to the old saying that an idle mind is the devil's workshop. Y'all remember that one? Following that 2011 allegation, Darren stayed out of the news for about 1.5 years. And during that time, he worked as a TV analyst, most notably for NFL Network, a job that he was eventually fired from because of the portion of the video that we are soon about to get into. So like I said, he managed to stay away from any negative press for about 1.5 years following the 2011 allegation. Perhaps the close call had scared him straight, or maybe he just gotten better at not getting caught. It's actually unclear, we don't know. Either way, by 2013, the former NFL All-Pro had reduced himself honestly to scum. He was associating with scum, he was hanging around scum, and unsurprisingly, he became exactly that. He took the values that his family had trained him to hold dear, and he basically traded those in along with his fame and notoriety and used it to take advantage of women on a repeated basis. Think I'm bullshit? Alright, check it out. 2013, Dude started to really ramp up the scumbag behavior. He had not one, not two, not three, but 4 accusations in 1 year, 2013. Now, here go the rundown. On February 2nd, 2013, Darren Sharper allegedly helped drug a woman who was working as a model at a pre-Super Bowl party in New Orleans, and she was consequently raped by Darren Sharper's friend. August 31st, same year, 2013, Sharper allegedly rapes a different woman in New Orleans. The very next month, September 23rd, 2013, Darren Sharper allegedly drugs 2 women in New Orleans and rapes them with his accomplice, Eric Nunez. Now there's more information attached to this one. Here's how the story goes. Following the Saints' victory over the Cardinals earlier that day, a bar owner named Tony Stafford, who was chilling at a different bar, one that he didn't own, ended up seeing a girl that he knew, said to be a former New Orleans Saints cheerleader. He said that she was stumbling through the crowd, basically looking like she was sleepwalking. At that precise moment, he sees Darren Sharper sitting in a corner with his hat pulled low. So Tony asks Darren about the woman, and Darren allegedly responds, "Oh, she on the potion. She's ready," as he gets up and prepares to take her to his apartment. Shortly after that, Darren grabs her by the arm and, escorts her out of the club. Tony later said in an interview that Darren wasn't going home with a woman. He was going home with a zombie, and Tony decided he couldn't look the other way, so he called a friend who was a deputy. Now, I gotta pause the story right there because imagine how dire the situation must have looked. Again, Tony Stafford owns a bar. He see this type of stuff all the time. He see drunk people every single day. He see them leave with people every single day. But this particular night, she was so out of it and it looked so weird and it just hit him wrong. You know what I'm saying? To the point where he was like, I gotta do something about this. So he calls the deputy. All right, back to the story. So Tony picks up the phone, calls his friend who's a deputy, and he convinces him to go to Darren Sharper's apartment and just check out the situation at least. According to the story, the officer actually does it. He goes to Darren Sharper's house. When he gets there, he actually catches a glimpse of the woman laying on the bed completely passed out. But when he tries to intervene, Darren pushes him back saying, and I quote, "Dude, I got this. Y'all go home. Everything's fine. I'm gonna bring her home." What do you think happens next? The officer leaves. Here's the deadbolt locked behind him, according to him. The next morning, the lady wakes up. She sees a lot of missed calls and text messages from Tony, I assume, because the first thing she does is she calls Tony Stafford, the dude who called the police officer in the first place. When she calls him, she's crying. She wakes up and there is Darren Sharper, completely unclothed, and we know his MO at this point, so we know what has taken place. The woman is in tears, but she can't remember anything that happened. She just feels, she feels really terrible. Darren Sharper right there doing his dirt right under the police officer's nose. A terrifying story, but there's actually an even darker twist to it. See, the real reason the officer didn't do anything is because he was Darren Sharper's friend, not just any friend. So in the first reported incident of 2013, when Darren allegedly drugged a woman who was working at the pre-Super Bowl party in New Orleans, and she ended up being raped by one of Darren's friends, well, that friend is this cop. That friend was named Brandon Licciardi, who happened to be a deputy. The same exact deputy that showed up at Darren Sharper's house the night before he literally, assaults, for lack of the other term, because I just don't want to keep saying it, this woman, man. So basically, even though Tony was trying to help, he ended up calling the guy who was in on the thing the whole damn time. Now check this out. We already know what that is. Let's put that over here. Even with that being the case, I do actually believe a part of Brandon's story where, Darren Sharper basically is pushing him out as he is trying to convince him not to do what he's about to do, even though he wasn't man enough in that situation to step up and forcibly stop him and do the right goddamn thing. I do believe he probably tried to talk him out of it, not because he thought that was just the right thing to do, but because Tony saw you take her out of the club. They're gonna call the police, you idiot. And this time, they not gonna call Brandon Licciardi because he ain't do a damn thing the first time. And that's exactly what eventually happens. But I do want to say that Brandon Licciardi, Darren Sharper's friend, he did end up pleading guilty as well to, that other crime, and I don't know which other ones because I looked that deep into him, but he also got 17 years as one of Darren's co-defendants as well. So anyway, like back into the timeline, I believe that Brandon Licciardi, the officer, was afraid that Tony was gonna bring in other actual cops who had actually wanted to do the damn job. Basically, that's exactly what happened. So when the woman woke up the next morning crying, she calls Tony, who was able to convince her to go to the authorities. And as a man, I hear a lot of other men say things like, well, why you have to convince her to go to the authorities in the first place? If it happened, da da da. And I understand that those dudes are just defensive because sometimes women lie about this stuff. Like I've covered stories of women lying and putting dudes in terrible situations, ruining dudes' lives. You know what I'm saying? Sean Oakman, for example. But one of the reasons I hate when women lie on dudes about stuff like this is because the stuff actually happen every day, bro. So now when it actually does happen, people are unable to show any empathy or compassion for real victims. You feel what I'm saying? And I hate that, man. So in this case, the victim did file a report with the New Orleans Police Department. But both she and Tony said that the detectives in charge never seemed interested in actually solving the case. Said they treated them in a hostile manner, and that the word dutiful was described. Like they was pretty much just trying to check off a list so they can move on to the next thing. In football terms, it'd be like giving a bare minimum effort or going through the motions, like that type of deal. I almost feel like there should be a middle person or a middle agency that women who have been assaulted can actually go and deal with. Somebody with some real training in psychology who know how to empathize and show compassion and some delicacy as we work through this and try to get to the actual truth of the matter. Somebody who understands the patterns, they know what to look for, because they may also be able to help and figure out when women are just lying, or maybe they're just angry at a dude and they're making stuff up. You feel what I'm saying? Like somebody with experience in between the victims, alleged victims, and the cops. Somebody in the middle that know what the hell they doing when it comes to this. Because the police, they have a very broad job. They're not very good at this particular thing, generally speaking. Now at this point, Darren knows full well he's being investigated and the allegations have stacked up tremendously. I mean, at this point, we was up to 5 total allegations, and every single story sounds nearly identical. Met woman at some point during the night, she's drugged, and then she wakes up and doesn't really have her memory or her bearings. Some of her clothing is missing, and dude is sitting there, all of his clothing is missing. But Darren still didn't stop there. He just tried to relocate. 1 month later, he racked up his 4th allegation of 2013 alone, but this time in a different state. On October 30th, 2013, Darren Sharper allegedly drugged 2 women and raped one of the women in Los Angeles after meeting them at a West Hollywood nightclub. He first invited them to an after party, then told them that he had to stop by his hotel real quick. Invited them up to the suite, just for a second. And while they was waiting, he served them Patron and a coffee flavored tequila that was supposed to help maintain their buzz and keep them awake. But if you've been following the damn story, you already know the concoction that he gave them had the exact opposite effect, and within a few minutes, they was both completely out cold. The police would later say that the drinks were spiked with Ambien and morphine. Then when the women woke up the next morning, y'all already know the deal at this point. They find each other in the house eventually. They run out of there crying and they go to the hospital to get examined. But the situation still didn't stop there. The very next month, man, October 20th, 2013. Yeah, we still in 2013, man. Darren Sharper allegedly meets 3 females, Arizona State University students in Temple, Arizona, and allegedly rapes 2 of them after drugging them. Same exact thing. Both women immediately underwent assault examinations within 12 hours of the assault and filed a police report. At this point, the Darren Sharper people back in his hometown thought they knew was long gone. The former hometown hero was now fully aware that he was being investigated for a bevy of sex crimes that he was stacking up across a multitude of states. One of his alleged victims even called this out in court, saying that thanks to his arrogance and what she called clear stupidity, he kept drugging and raping women even after he knew she was talking to the police. She said, quote, "Within days, You gave me and the entire judicial system in Louisiana the big middle finger because you thought we weren't capable of stopping you. You continued to rape other women in Los Angeles, Phoenix, and Las Vegas. By January 2014, dude was getting bolder by the day. He allegedly met 2 women in West Hollywood nightclub, drugged and raped them both. Then get this, the very next day dude was at it again. This time he was accused of drugging 2 women and a man at a nightclub, then taking the women back to his hotel and assaulting them both. You can see that these crimes, it seemed like they couldn't get a whole lot worse, were somehow managing to escalate over the course of time. And who knows how far this dude might have gone had he continued to be unchecked. Mercifully, his reign of terror was brought to an end when he was finally arrested January 17, 2014. By the end of it all, he'd allegedly drugged and raped between 9 and 16 women across 4 different states, all within only a 2-year period. Darren Sharper eventually pleaded guilty, saying, "I would like to apologize 1,000 times. I'm still trying to figure out why I made some of these choices. I lived my life right for 38 years, then I took this path." I'm not buying it. Darren Sharper's been incarcerated since 2014 and actually will be eligible for parole in 2024. If he gets out at that time, he'll have to undergo 3 to 5 years of intensive sexual counseling. He'll also be forced to register as a sex offender and will spend the rest of his life on parole under supervision of authorities in Arizona. Nobody knows exactly why Darren Sharper became what he became after football, or if he actually became that thing during his playing days, only to finally be found out after retirement, as studies show that only about 1 in 3 victims of sexual assault actually reported. Dude was known as a bit of a ladies' man, and like many guys who commit the type of crimes that he'd go on to commit, dude never actually had any issues landing women. Which is why it's pretty obvious that his transgressions are the result of a screw loose somewhere within. With a lot of the stories I do, I can find a way to relate. Usually either I or somebody I know has been through something similar. But this time, thankfully, I have no experience with a situation like this, so I have no clue how realistic rehabilitation actually is. Therefore, at this point, all I can do is the same thing you can do. Hope and pray. And what I'm hoping and praying for is that the counseling actually works, and when this dude is set free back into society, which he will be at some point, he's actually rehabilitated and not just the same dude but older. You know what I'm saying? So I hope the counseling works. I don't have a ton of confidence that behavior this demented can actually be changed. And like I said earlier, it's one of the few situations where I find it damn near impossible to empathize with the perpetrator. I don't know if that's good, bad, or whatever. I don't really care. It's just true. So I'm just being honest. And I find it especially difficult when they're in their late 30s when they commit the crimes. Younger men need time to mature, and sometimes they make mistakes in a split moment that they will never be able to make up for. And while I understand in those situations that they have to be punished, I can empathize with them, and I tend to feel bad because I know I did dumb stuff, but I just didn't get the same results that they got, right? But I could have. But this situation is completely different. First off, dude is damn near 40. You're a fully grown man. You understand completely the consequences of your actions. You know exactly what you're doing. You actually got a daughter of your own, and still, bro, still you do this. And it's not one of those gray situations where, you know, things just kind of go left real quick one night and something crazy happens. It's not even that. It's a repeated pattern over and over and over again. So that's where I'm at with it. I made the video, so I figured I might as well give you what I feel about the situation so people don't just assume and attack me in the comments for stuff that, you know, I don't even feel like that. If you're gonna come at me in the comments on social or wherever, at least come at me for what I actually said, not what you assume I feel. But that's my opinion, and yours may be completely different. And if that's the case, here's a few things to consider that may support the way you feel about the situation. So if we take another look at the FBI findings earlier in the video, they go on to mention one crucial piece of information. They say that a high proportion of the abusers they studied reported sexual abuse as children. This is also something I pointed out in my 2019 video about Kellen Winslow Jr., which is a very similar case to this one. But although it's reported that Darren Sharper comes from a great family, we know that terrible things do sometimes happen when maybe the parents aren't around. But there's no reports or anything that suggests that this is the case with Darren Sharper. But with that said, you gotta be fair and point out the fact that it's absolutely a possibility. Another potential factor is CTE, and I honestly hate how overused this is as an excuse. But if a guy played that many years of football, not to mention he's a safety who's always coming down hitting people, you have to at least consider the fact that CTE could be a possibility. Earlier in the video, when I said that his behavior was the result of a screw loose, that could be an issue that he's always had, something deeply rooted in his character and personality. But it could also be from repeated trauma to the head. Again, I don't necessarily buy that in this situation, but it's absolutely possible. And if you believe that, I don't blame you. Regardless, I'm interested in what y'all believe in the comments. Though obviously none of us know, we are allowed to have opinions. But I do think it's important to try really hard to separate the actual facts from those opinions. That's what I've tried to do in this video, and this is a crazy topic, man. I know I just tried to go in and pull the band-aid straight off. Hopefully this didn't come across too bad. And I know it's kind of crazy subject matter, but I hope y'all was able to enjoy it. But anyway, at the end of the day, Darren's gonna have to figure out how to clear this one in his own conscience, according to his own principles and morals, if he can reconnect to those. And while I'm sure his family will always love him, I have to imagine that they're ashamed, whether they're willing to admit that publicly or not. Imagine raising 3 kids and having them all do well in school, and then both of your boys get drafted into the NFL during the same year. And older brother Jamie, by the way, had a really solid 9-year NFL career himself, leading the NFL in tackles in 2003, in case you was wondering, because I was. Now, you raise them, they become hometown heroes, they both win Super Bowls, everything plays out perfectly. But then your youngest son does this right as he's about to turn 40 and, tarnishes everything that you guys have tried to build. And in many ways, I mean that literally. Darren Sharper's high school, where he was a living legend, took down all of his memorabilia. William and Mary didn't just take down pictures. They actually removed dude from their Hall of Fame altogether. The New Orleans Saints, they took down the Super Bowl images as they all attempt to wipe away the stains from Darren Sharper's tainted legacy.